ABC7 presents Eyewitness Newsmakers with Adrian Alpert.
Today on Eyewitness Newsmakers, the votes are in, the midterm has moved on. What did Tuesday's vote mean for the top issues in California, the economy and jobs? Here for a special roundtable discussion, three people who will live every day with the election's outcome. Democratic State Senator Alex Padilla, re-elected to his second term, Gary Tobin, President and CEO of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce, working for the business community, and Carl Friedlander, Vice President of the LA County Federation of Labor, representing 800,000 union workers. Good morning. I'm Adrian Alpert. Senator Padilla, we want to say you were handily reelected, and we wanted to talk to you first with your congratulations on what it would mean now for you, pretty much still a very Democratic legislature in California, looking at a Republican Congress. When we talk about jobs and the kind of money that California is always looking to Washington to try to assist, what will that mean as far as getting along?
Well, a couple of things. I think California, the state capital, will still be hopeful of federal assistance as we're trying not so much just to balance our budget, but to rebound the state's economy. But I think with a little bit more restraint, the realism in all of us is we're going to see less of that assistance over the next couple of years compared to what we've enjoyed for the last couple of years. But even despite this contrast of the results of California's elections being so democratic, certainly in the legislature and certainly in all the statewide races, compared to what happened in the rest of the country, if we take one step deeper, we're not that far out of step with the rest of the country. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you look at the top of our ticket, Governor-elect Brown, re-elected Senator Barbara Boxer. Their platforms, which, yes, included protecting the environment and all those other things, were centered on jobs, jobs, jobs. But California voters, between candidates and even the measures, were even more specific in saying, yes, we want jobs, but we're going to bank on this clean tech sector, the green economy, as the way out of the economic recession.
Mr. Tobin, let's talk about this from the Chamber's perspective. We heard jobs, jobs, jobs from everybody, but the Chamber and through political action committees clearly got behind some different candidates. And do you feel as strongly that jobs are still going to be focus number one?
Jobs were focus number one in that election. It was so clear that everything else was so far behind. Jobs and fiscal responsibility and government spending appeared to be the issues that voters, when they went to the polls, they said, we have got to get things under control, and my personal financial situation is worse than it was several years ago, and we've got to get that under control.
Mr. Friedlander, certainly 800,000 jobs are nothing to be overlooked. And when we talk about employees, public employees, private employees, transportation, janitors, hotel workers, we look at these kinds of numbers, and certainly Labor put a lot of money into this election. Probably, would you say the biggest concern was public employees and pensions, which certainly became topic A?
Well, it was jobs for everybody, public and private. We had conversations with hundreds of thousands of people in Los Angeles in the build-up to this election, and jobs was, most of the conversations were about jobs, whether it's public sector or private sector.
Well, how do we do this now? We still have a state legislature, a budget that you're going to be looking at, Senator.
Correct.
That's, what, $12 billion we're still looking at as a deficit?
Projected for the next year, a significant deficit. But the good news is we now have, or we will have, a governor who knows the ins and outs. And I think, unlike Governor Schwarzenegger, with all due respect, a tremendous respect for the governing and legislative process in the state capitol to forge those agreements with both houses of the legislature, both parties. We also have a governor who I think is going to be even more effective, should he fail to be successful in bringing parties to the table inside the Capitol, to go directly to the voters and offer them, as he said in the campaign, the no-nonsense, flat-out truth to say, here's option A, here's option B. With revenues on the table, here's what a budget can look like. With revenues off the table, here's what a budget's going to look like, and have the voters decide.
He was finally first asked his post-election news conference, his first news conference after being elected, would he have considered the taxes that he might have to raise, and he said if voters turn down an $18 vehicle license fee, they're not going to go for taxes. But do you feel that secure, Mr. Tobin, because taxes certainly to business are what we always hear drives business out of California?
The The vote yesterday was 60%, 40% on that issue of the $18 vehicle fee for taxes. And so with voters turning that down so overwhelmingly, I don't see that the voters are in a mood to pass additional taxes. I also think that the federal government is not in the mood to bail out California. What we have to do is do it ourselves, and we have to do it the old-fashioned way. The governor should, on his first day, bring labor and the environmentalists and elected officials and business together around a table and say, we've got to create jobs. It's the only way to increase the revenue for this state is to create jobs. And I'm not going to stand for any win-lose situations. This has to become win-win for all of us.
Well, doesn't that usually mean tax breaks? Isn't that something that labor usually opposes?
Well, it depends. And I think we'll have now with Jerry Brown as governor an honest conversation with everybody where we can really, I agree, sit down, put our heads together and talk about what it's going to take to create not just jobs, but good jobs, jobs that provide families with a level of income and security that they need in order to thrive and prosper in this country. But
how does California provide the incentive for that?
I actually think this is a great example of what I mentioned. Despite Democrats doing so overwhelmingly well in the last elections, how we're still forced to move towards the center to get the progress we need. On the one hand, some of my Democratic colleagues can't outright dismiss tax incentives programs for certain industries because we don't have the good jobs without the good employers in Los Angeles or anywhere in California. On the other hand, I don't think our Republican colleagues can outright dismiss maybe conditioning some of those incentive programs. Tax incentives should not be risked as subsidizing shareholder dividends. If we want to put strings attached that some of the benefit to corporations result in increased hiring in California or reinvestment in economic activity in California, then I think we're doing the tax incentives in a very responsible way. But neither the left nor the right can completely dismiss the discussion. We have to be strategic about it, and we have to be focused.
You know, one of the ballot measures, and we can talk about each of these, but Proposition 23, which was one that was sort of tied to providing some more incentive until unemployment fell to 5.5%, and voters said a big no to that one. But when we talk about the jobs that might have created, was anybody worried that was going to pass? Was there any thought that polling could have been wrong on that?
I think there was significant fear that Prop 23 would have passed, which would have suspended AB 32 and the policies surrounding achieving those climate change goals. If there's one bright spot in the economy today, it is the clean tech sector. It's the venture capital that's coming into California to try to find the tools, the mechanisms, the very technologies that will help us achieve the greenhouse gas reduction goals. And I think we heard loud and clear from Californians that we don't want to reverse that trend. If anything, California is priding itself as the model for the rest of the nation.
Mr. Friedlander, do you agree with that? Because certainly the jobs and this unemployment issue that was tied to 23 was, for labor, a deep concern.
Yes, and Jerry Brown, I think, will, made clean jobs, green jobs, a centerpiece of his campaign. It's one of the pillars of his approach to job creation, which I think the voters endorsed in this election.
But again, using this as an example, this is an area, let's take renewable energy. Big push for increasing our renewable energy sources in California from an emissions standpoint, from a job creation standpoint. If we get the policies wrong, we will transition as a nation from being dependent on the Middle East for oil to being dependent on China for our wind turbines and our solar panels. We have to get the policies right where, yes, we're providing the tax incentives, whether it's to business or to consumers or the subsidies or what have you, but to do so in a way that's maximizing the job creation and the manufacturing activity.
We'll take a break very quickly, and we'll get businesses' perspective, though, on where these jobs can be coming from as well. Our roundtable discussion on jobs in California's economy continues when Eyewitness Newsmakers comes back.